So here, watch. So Gabor Maté goes on the air with Piers Morgan. Now, Piers Morgan has been having a lot of, you got to give it to him. He's been bringing on people on both sides of the issue, even though Piers is on the wrong side of most issues. COVID, the vax, Ukraine war, and now Israel, Palestine. At least he brings on people to make him look like an asswipe. And so you got a tip of the hat, right? You got to give it to him, really. So here he brings on Gabor Maté, father of Aaron Maté, who's a friend of this show. And let's watch. Gabor has some words of wisdom.
Israel's right to defense.
Yeah. So he talks about Israel's right to defense.
Israel's right to defense.
Yeah.
Yes. Israel has the right to defend itself. Every country does.
Can I just say this about Israel's right to defense before I let him say what he's going to say? Israel does have the right to self-defense, which, believe it or not, the law defines differently than sustained bloody revenge upon the children of your enemies. Isn't that wild? Self-defense is when you use an appropriate level of force to stop your attacker within, say, let's be generous, within like a 7-hour window. How about that? So yes, I believe in Israel's right to self-defense. In fact, I'm wondering why they didn't exercise that right for a full 7 fucking hours when they were being attacked by Hamas. Maybe they just ate and they were afraid to get a cramp. Maybe that's what it was. I'm kidding. I'm pretty sure I know why they didn't. Hey, go on. Well, here we go. Here now, let's listen to him.
Israel's right to defense.
Yeah.
Yes. Israel has the right to defend itself. Every country does. But Israel has no right to impose an occupation on people. Now, look, I was born in Hungary. In 1956, when I was 13, studying for Bar Mitzvah, there was the Great Hungarian Revolution against Soviet occupation. And it was after that revolution that we became refugees and came to Canada. Now, did Russia have the right to defend itself against the Hungarian revolutionaries? You know, so, and mostly when we talk about Israel's right of defense, we're taking isolated Palestinian actions, but we're not saying that this population also has the right to defend against the occupation. I'm not justifying the terrible events of October the 7th. I'm talking in the absence of historical awareness. It all just looks like Israel defending itself. But against whom? Against the population that has been massacring in a number of thousands for 80 years and taking their lands and destroying their homes and jailing their children and torturing them. That's the history. Now, unless we know that, it all looks like this poor little country trying to defend itself. But against whom? Against people it's been occupying and displacing for 80 years. That's the history, as Israeli historians have shown. I don't make this stuff up. I wish it wasn't true. I wish I could believe in the dream of the Jewish state. I love that dream. Except I found out at what price, at what nightmare that imposed on the Palestinians.
Wow. That's very well said. People forget, like people, I think, Keaton, you made the point on our show last week when people say, what about October 7th? And you say, well, what about October 6th? What about October 5th? What about October 4th, 3rd, 2nd? What about all the shit that led up to October 7th? They never want to talk about that. And that's exactly what he's talking about. And an occupying force doesn't have the right to self-defense against someone they're occupying who's fighting back against them. That's the point he's making. And go ahead. So let me throw it over to the two live Jews and see what they have to say.
Yeah, no, if you take it back before October 7th, like you always say, it's amazing how many people want to start stories in the third act, be it Israel, Hamas, or Ukraine, Russia. If you started the story on October 6th, then October 7th was an act of self-defense by that logic, right? I mean, you're talking about an imprisoned and occupied population that is surveilled constantly, policed brutally. When they had a peaceful right to return march, they were sniped from rooftops. And so, yeah, what he said there is absolutely flawless.
Well, it's really a question of, well, did South Africa have a right to defend itself against African blacks who were uprising against them? Did they have a right to defend themselves and preserve their way of life and their system? I think most of us would say no. So what do you mean by that? The UN recognized in 1948 the right of Palestinians to return to their homes and to their land. Every day that these Palestinians are penned up in the West Bank and Gaza is a violation of international law. So Israel, first of all, before you even talk about a right to defense, let's talk about the right of return. Because if Israel honors international law, well, then these people will be free from the river to the sea, as the phrase actually means. They're going to be re-enfranchised. They're going to have full rights. And Israel will no longer be a Jewish state. And this is the thing that they have to avoid desperately any discussion of. As soon as you start questioning the premise of a Jewish state, they have to scream anti-Semitism. They have to scream Holocaust, because we would never tolerate that formulation from any other religious group. If you say this is a Christian state, fascism. If you say this is a Muslim state, medieval. You say it's a Jewish state, it becomes okay. All of a sudden, you don't see how barbaric it is to establish an apartheid theocracy in the 21st century. They can't have that conversation. That's why they're so furious to always deflect to the Holocaust and anti-Semitism.
And by the way, you bring up 1948. Did you know that, speaking of self-defense in Israel, did you know that the Israeli Constitution has no Second Amendment and a right to bear arms? Not only that, they don't even have a constitution. Did you know that Israel doesn't have a constitution? They were supposed to make one in 1948, but turns out the only democracy in the Middle East didn't want to be hamstrung by bullshit like a Bill of Rights. That and many other reasons that suck and aren't at all valid. So, yeah, I don't know what they're worried about. Why doesn't Israel just make a constitution and then just ignore it like we do here in the United States? But they don't have one. Did you know that?
I did know that they didn't have one. Yeah.
Oh,
because that came up when they were doing that Supreme Court power
with
play.
The Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Don't they have something like what they have in Canada, like articles,
a charter or something?
Charter.
Yeah.
I'm under the impression they have something, but it's not a constitution. Which, from what I understand, that's true of Canada as well.
We're doing live comedy shows in Oxnard, California, Venice, California, Palmdale, California, Omaha, Nebraska, Des Moines, Milwaukee, Lansing, Michigan, Bend, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, and Boston. Plus, we're going to put a date in Edmonton, Canada, plus Vancouver. See ya. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.